Welcome back to the Tech and Real Estate channel. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Hunter, a dynamic real estate investor who started his journey at Clemson University, initially drawn to cybersecurity before pivoting into real estate after reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Hunter's path from obtaining his real estate license to now specializing in creative finance and house hacking is inspiring. We'll dive into his approach to building his portfolio, the lessons he's learned as both an agent and an investor, and how he's leveraged mentorship to navigate real estate's unique challenges. Let's get started. Hey, Hunter, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be on and talking with the both of you.
Yes, of course. It's been a little bit of time since we last chatted on Mark's channel. We had some fun there in the live stream.
We did. Definitely a lot that's happened, for the both of us between now and then. A couple hurricanes, and thankfully, I think we're both okay. So
yes, thankfully. Well, to get started, would love to hear a little bit more about your background and how you ended up in real estate.
yeah, so my background really started in college. So I attended Clemson University while I was a freshman. Um, as most college students are, they don't really know what they want to do in life, and sort of floating around trying to, find out what it is, switching majors, all of that. I started actually in computer science, had a real big desire to go into cybersecurity, and I thought, hey, well, why not, do computer stuff? And I'm somewhat techie, quickly got into that and realized that those were not my skills. So decided to change and pivot on my degree, going between my fall and spring semester of my freshman year. During that Christmas break, I ended up reading a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Couldn't tell you where I picked it up. Maybe I heard it somewhere, saw it in a bookstore. But anyway, I picked it up and read it over that break and really just sort of fell in love with the idea of real estate and entrepreneurship. My dad's always been an entrepreneur. He's a pharmacist by trade, but has owned some different pharmacies and actually has a hand cream company. So I do have some entrepreneurial spirit from him, but I guess it never really sort of clicked for me that, hey, I could actually go in and do something that's purposeful and also sort of utilizes some of my skill sets. So all that being said, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, learned more about real estate investing. That you could own a house, in, very, very simple terms, as an investment. Be able to collect rent. Be able to make a profit. And so that idea really fascinated me. So fast forward a little bit, get back into school, start connecting with people in the area. Actually connected with a buddy of mine in Clemson who is a big investor, been investing there for a number of years, and he recommended that I get my real estate license in order to go into investing. And I was like, seems counterproductive, but I'll go ahead and jump on in and do that. So anyway, I got my real estate license and decided that, hey, this is pretty fun. I enjoy selling properties, and it's a really good experience. I get to learn sort of the ins and outs of the market, and I've been doing that ever since. So it's fun to be able to jump in full time with that. Post college, and it's been a fun ride.
That is excellent. You've been pretty much just kind of rolling with it, right? Like you went into college, had one, mind frame of what you were going to pursue afterwards, but then this book hits you. You're like, wait, I can make my money work for me and not be in a cycle for the rest of my life. So you decide to pursue real estate. You've kind of seen not real estate, but entrepreneurship throughout your life with your father's work experience. And as you decide to tackle real estate specifically, you do one of the things that a lot of investors try to decide, should I become an agent as well or not? I love to just stick on that moment for a minute. One, what was the process like for you getting your agent license? Was it pretty difficult studying, or was it easier? And have you found it to be fruitful for when actually investing?
Yeah, really great question. I think for a lot of people, it's really going to depend, to answer your question, on getting licensed for the investment side of it. I'll certainly dive into more of that here in a second. But in South Carolina, in order to get your real estate license, you can actually take classes online, and you have to take a total of 90 hours. It's not like college where you think 90 credit hours, which is 2 to 3 years worth. It's more like 90 literal hours. So, in theory, you could get it done in about 2 weeks, 2, 3 weeks. You go through the process to take some tests, and you sort of come out the other side licensed. Really teaches you the ins and outs of how not to go to jail or get sued in real estate. Very important, right? But it's not going to teach you the process to work with clients, acquire clients, actually be a fiduciary for them and help them get from A to B in a real estate transaction. So that's really where I think a good, solid brokerage comes into play. But to answer your question, for me and where I was in my stage of life, getting my license did help me on the investment side. I could really dive in and sort of learn the particulars of a market. I could learn, hey, if I want to invest in single family housing in this zip code, here's typically the average rents. Here's what the average price points are. I can get a 3-bed, 1 bath that has 1,200 square feet and add a second bathroom, and I've added value, and can therefore charge more rent. So from a very basic level, you learn a lot. And then I think also just networking, talking with different people, getting into the business. I remember there was one gentleman out of Arizona, I think Phoenix maybe, but he invested in a lot of single family houses in the area I was selling. And so being a new agent, I did a lot of grunt work for him. Maybe didn't get paid what I probably should have, just because we didn't do a whole lot of transactions together. But needless to say, the experience was well worth it. And so that very quickly parlays into actual investments, when I decided to pull the trigger for myself.
Yep. When you were deciding which brokerage to hang your license with, was that part of your thought process? Did you go with a company that offered a lot of training, or did you go somewhere where you could have like a mentor and kind of shadow them and learn from them?
So for me, I ended up choosing the latter. I chose more the mentor route. At the time, the person who told me to get my real estate license, he's an investor. He had a good friend of his who was an agent and an investor as well. But he said, "Hey, I'm going to connect you with my agent friend." And that individual really coached and mentored me my first couple of years into the business. And they happened to be with Keller Williams. So I ended up just joining Keller Williams, their firm at the time. And that was really helpful for me. Really got to learn through a lot of the training that the brokerage offered, sort of the ins and outs of working with clients, being able to acquire clients. Like, for example, if you get a property under contract, how do you get it to the closing table? Well, there's escrow, or, the title process, there's inspections, there's the appraisal, there's, working with the lender, there's, make ready repairs. You name it. I've had to deal with it. But you get to learn that, one, through experience, but two, through mentors, and just other people. So that was definitely a great learning experience for me.
Yeah, what a really smart move of learning via mentors. And I find a lot of folks when they get their real estate agent license, they think like, okay, like I'm good. Like leads are just going to flow to me. I'm going to have all these properties ready to sell, ready to buy, but there's this whole other side of the business, like the marketing aspect of it. Did you find that even with the mentor, that was like a challenge initially to wrap your head around?
It was. I think it is a very common misconception that once you get your license, family members, friends are going to start using you. And I'm sure for some people that's the case. For me, that was not. Maybe it was, me being a younger agent at the time, both younger in age and younger in experience years wise in the business. But I think a lot of people say, hey, if I'm going to be purchasing probably my biggest asset of my life, I want somebody who's trusted, who has that experience. And so, I didn't have people falling in my lap. I wish I did. But for me, I spent really the first 2 years cold calling to try to find leads. Primarily, those really were listing clients. So people who had their house for sale by owner, maybe who had listed with another agent, and their contract had expired, so we were able to reach out to them. Could have just been calling people in the neighborhood to say, "Hey, we've got 123 Main Street listed, and we're trying to see if you know anyone who's looking to move into your neighborhood." So you could maybe try to find some buyers and also build relationships there. So that was pretty successful the first couple of years for me getting into the business.
After going through, all the training and the mentorship and stuff like that, um, How long did it take you to get to that first closing table, and how did that feel, getting that first one under your belt?
Yeah, the first one is always the best one. It I can't remember the exact amount of time. I want to say it's probably 8 or 9 months from start to finish. Um, I was very fortunate that my first buyer client that I worked with, they had worked with another agent previously that they had a falling out with, and they had already been looking for a little bit, and they sort of knew exactly what they wanted. And we took a look at a couple houses, and one of the first ones we looked at, they ended up buying. So I didn't have to do a whole lot of work from showing them, 10, 20, 30 houses, which, does happen from time to time. But since they already knew what they wanted, we could jump in real quick and help them get to the closing table. So that one was definitely one of my more memorable transactions.
Yeah, that's excellent. So let's hear about the transition when you get comfortable with real estate as an agent, but then you start looking for your own deals.
So I think part of my process is that, from the beginning, I knew that I wanted to be on the investment side, but actually working with some of these clients and, as the agent, we get to review the HUD or the closing document, closing statements, and the attorney or the escrow title company is going to put that ledger together of, credits and debits and who gets what and who brings what. And you can start to sort of look in there and see who's getting paid what dollar amount. And, beside my brokerage name was the dollar amount for my commission. And then typically you're going to go see, the buyer or seller, what they're making. And I realized really early on that the buyers or the sellers, whoever is doing the transaction on the investor side, they're making, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 10 times maybe what I'm making in a commission check. And I'm like, man, like I feel like I did just as much work on this transaction as they did. Because some of that process might be helping them purchase a property to flip. So I can see what they bought it for. Maybe even help on that, rehab as far as just going on and checking on the property periodically. And so, to a degree, I feel like I'm doing almost as much work as they are, and they're getting such a big check comparatively. So that was really a mindset shift for me, and the light bulb sort of came on, so to speak. And so then I was like, okay, I need to find a way to make this happen. I need to be able to buy an investment property. And so I really went through a process to analyze multiple ways to do it. Being a younger agent, I didn't really have a ton of money. So it's like, okay, I have a set dollar amount. I can't go buy a large property. I probably, can't get a typical investment loan putting 25% plus down. So I looked at a couple different options. One was creative financing, which found some deals, but nothing panned out. And then I found a duplex close to me that I could actually house hack. So that's really how I got started, was through house hacking, finding that first property, and working through that process. And it's sort of been a snowball ever since.
Excellent. And this first property that you got as a house hack, so it was through creative finance? Was it like a subject to or seller finance deal?
So that one was not. That one was just a straight out purchase. But I knew the investor who owned that property. We had a good relationship and had worked together previously. And I just reached out and I said, "Hey, do you still happen to own this property? If so, would you consider selling?" And they said, "Sure, I would." And so we went back and forth, and they said, "Hey, I want to get this price for it," and that seemed really affordable to me at the time. So I said, "Okay, let's do it." So that one was bought with more of a traditional primary residence type financing. So good interest rate, good terms, and now looking back, it's cash flowing pretty well. So, but I think for a lot of people, maybe they're not in that position. Maybe they do need to look at creative finance. So I'm a huge proponent and believer in creative financing, and that's actually most of what I buy now. Years down the line in my portfolio is through creative financing. That could be, subject to seller financing, some sort of hybrid. I mean, even, something as crazy as like trading one property as a down payment for the other and having the seller carry a portion and getting a bank involved for another portion. You can do some really, really sort of unique stuff, in the realm of creative financing.
Wow. Some of this I haven't even heard of before. So how did you get like ramped up in the knowledge of creative finance?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important to surround yourself with high quality people and people who are doing what you want to be doing. So I was very fortunate to build good relationships with other investors, doing the whole creative finance stuff. To me, it didn't really matter if they owned one property or 10,000 properties. I just wanted to be around people who were actively doing deals and trying to learn and understand and grow their knowledge and their relationships more. So, was able to go dive into some of those and develop some deep relationships there with some people here locally in the Greenville community. And one of those I actually partnered on a deal with. I was building some relationships with wholesalers in particular, because I was always looking for deals. And so I had a wholesaler bring one to me. And that's actually one that I want to be able to talk with your community about as sort of a little case study. But the deal was brought to me and they said, hey, we need a certain dollar amount to be able to buy it from the seller. And I connected with my friend and mentor. I said, hey, I think this is an opportunity for creative finance, but I've never done that before. So I'm going to need some help and for you to walk me through that. So we were able to walk through that and we completed a full cycle on that in about a year and a half. So that was a pretty fun deal.
Excellent. It's like these relationships that you've cultivated and built have helped you on both fronts, being able to find deals and help with like organizing the structure of acquiring these deals too.
100%. I mean, if I didn't have these people around me, there's no way I could have learned all of this. I mean, maybe some of it I could have got from a podcast or a book, but I think past a certain point, people need to just take action and be willing to fail. And just knowing that, hey, you're going to fail at some point, whether it's, smaller or bigger, but you're going to be able to move past that and you're going to be able to learn from that. And if you network and build and grow with more people, then you can do a whole lot more down the road. And that's, I think, sort of what I'm realizing now is that real estate, particularly commercial, what I'm getting into, you can't do that by yourself. You have to have a team, you have to have friends, and it's also not that fun to do it by yourself. I mean, you can't celebrate your wins, with other people if you're doing it by yourself. You don't have anyone there to sort of be a brain consensus, on decisions, where you can sort of group think and work through problems together. So I'm definitely a huge proponent of networking and utilizing others.
Yeah, speaking of working through problems, what was like the biggest? What do you think, looking back, what do you think was the biggest like hurdle that you had to come get across?
I think for that deal, it was probably mindset. Um, Mindset more in myself. The seller had a problem that they needed solved. And in my head and my limited thinking around it, I thought, hey, there's only one way to do this. I've got a square hole and a square peg and I'm going to try to, put it through there, but not realizing, hey, if I change up the way we do this, we can solve the problem, but also make it more beneficial for us, and we can work through it more. So, but yeah, let me run through some of these numbers just to give your audience a little understanding of what this deal was. So I do have a one pager that I'll send you guys for your audience, but I'm just going to read off of this a little bit so that you can get the backstory and we can look at some of the numbers together a little bit. So this case study that we're going to walk through was a seller financed and subject to single family house deal in Gaffney, South Carolina, which is about an hour up the road from where I am. Still somewhat in my local market. I do buy out of state, but since this was my first subject to seller finance deal, I wanted to make sure that this was, something that was local that I could go reach out, feel, and touch. So in 2022, so a couple years back, we found this deal with the seller. They originally wanted $115,000 cash for the deal. The value of the home was probably worth 130, maybe 140 if you sort of overlook some things, but 130. So keep that number in mind. So they were wanting about retail for it. We knew that this deal would not work for us unless we were able to find a more creative way to purchase it. We found out that the seller really wanted to get out of their mortgage. In other words, not have a payment. The house had been sitting vacant for, I think, at least 6 months. They had a tenant previously, but they moved out. Seller wanted to get some cash and really just to sort of move on from the property. So we ended up agreeing to take over their existing mortgage, subject to, and then agreeing to pay the seller some money up front for their equity and then paying out the rest of it over time. So we really considered renting out this house at first, just making it a long-term rental. But due to some of the repairs that would probably need to get it rent ready, we decided to wrap the underlying debt and actually sell the house on owner financing, which allowed us to hold the note for the property or the mortgage and be able to collect the spread in both the cash flow and the equity from the deal. So here's what some of the numbers specifically look like. So we purchased the property for $77,000, with $7,000 down to the seller. That's the money that they wanted up front. The seller held a second mortgage for the rest of their equity, which was $13,000. And then we took over their first mortgage, which was about $57,000. So all in, our mortgages between the first and the second mortgage was about $70,000 and some change. The total monthly payment on both of those payments to both parties was $739. So we ended up selling the property for $130,000 to a buyer that was willing to buy it in that condition and fix it up. They put a down payment of about $15,000. And then we held the mortgage at $115,000. So we had about $45,000 in value that we created between the underlying debt that we had and the wraparound contract for deed that we sold it on. And the payment coming in on that new paper that we created was about $1,200. And if you take out the payments that we have underneath, we're left with about $461. So this was really a very unique and unusual deal, but we were able to get it done because we solved the problem for the seller. And at the same time, we made money up front when we purchased because we paid $7,000 down. We collected $15,000. After some closing costs, we netted about $7,000. We created about $45,000 in equity by selling it on that wraparound mortgage. And then we created some cash flow every month, about $460, all by being able to be creative and sort of think outside the box a little bit and try to help the seller, get their property sold.
What an
That's impressive.
deal. Yeah. I mean, you end up having no money left in the deal, right? Because that down payment from the investor covers what you gave directly to that seller initially. And now you have a cash flowing contract in a sense where like you don't have to worry about the toilets.
Yeah, so you're on the right track. So technically, we sold the house on a contract for deeds. So the seller transferred the title to us. We kept their first mortgage on the property. That's in their name. They know it's staying there. We're just going to make payments. And they put a second mortgage for their equity on the property. So that way they're secure. Again, we're making payments on both, but then we get the title to it. And because we have the title to it, we can turn around and sell essentially the property and agree to give the title to somebody else in the future. And that's through the contract for deeds. So somebody's going to pay on that contract and they don't get the title until they pay it off. So, similar to a car, in a sense, somebody's not going to go get the title to the car, until they've paid that off fully. Similar situation here. So that's really why it worked for us, because we were able to own the mortgage and we owned the real estate. So we were sort of double collateralized in a sense. And then we're paying down the debt underneath. And so sort of the beauty of that deal is that from an amortization schedule perspective, think of it as like, here's the underlying debt. Here is the mortgage that we sold, up here, and they're sort of going down about like this. So it's sort of hard to see, but over time, you're actually building equity. So your equity technically grows in that mortgage just based on the interest rates of the two, and how they're getting paid down. But on that deal, we actually ended up selling the note. Closed actually a couple months back, I think in June or July. And so we decided, hey, we've owned this for a little bit. We don't necessarily want to own the note or the mortgage anymore. So we sold it to somebody and they paid cash for everything. And, paid off all the debt, particularly early, so everybody's happy. And yeah, so that one was a really fun deal. Sort of went full cycle for us. I wish everyone were that easy, and we could make money, three different ways. But I sort of highlight that as a case study because initially the seller wanted cash and they wanted a lot of money for their house, and because we were able to work through objections and really dive deep into the motivation, that's where we were able to make the deal.
So for someone who's, say, a newbie into the creative finance space, and from their mindset, they're hearing, okay, there was a seller who had a problem, was motivated, wanted to sell. You're in between, and at the end, there's an investor who does end up acquiring this deal. Why do they need you in the middle? Why wouldn't the two opposite sides talk to one another? So what is the problem or pain point why yourself and your partner become like a need in this transaction?
Yeah, so really this deal was brought to us from another wholesaler, and they were working direct with the seller. They had it under contract to go sell cash at a certain price. And by just talking with the wholesaler and with the sellers, we were able to figure out their pain point and sort of back in and say, well, hey, let's solve that for you. So we came in as more of the problem solvers, people bringing a solution. And so that's why we were able to put the deal together. And also, let me just preface that with that one being my first deal, I didn't know what I was doing, but I sort of had the deal. And my mentor, a good friend of mine, had the knowledge and the resources. So we partnered up together. And I think that's why it worked for us to partner, because we knew we were going to have little to no money into the deal. If we were able to pull everything off how we did. So that's, again, that's why it worked. We were able to get in with little to no money, in this case, making money, and then we made money every single month, and then whenever we sold. So I think my advice there would be, for someone who's newer, getting into it, don't be afraid to partner up with people, even if it means that you're going to give up 50+% of the deal. It's better to have 10% of nothing than 100% of zero. I think I said that right. 10% of something better than 100% of nothing. So if you have to partner up with one or two people to gain the skills and resources, that will help you far more than just trying to get the whole piece of the pie all at once. Because being almost 4 years in the investor chair, I've really realized that deals have to stack upon themselves. Like, unless you're going out and you're, cracking, $10 to $50 million deals out of the park, it's going to be really hard to become financially free and to get the life that you might want financially just right out the bat with one deal. So it's much better to partner up with people, learn the skills, and then just stack deal after deal upon themselves.
Would you say that was a typical deal, or that one was a little atypical? And like, are there some common themes between your deal structures that you go back to for creative financing?
Yeah, so I think that one's probably a little bit more atypical, particularly because there were three components to the transaction. There is the subject to piece, there's the seller finance piece, and then there's the wraparound mortgage or the seller financing on the backside to the end buyer. If you can make all three of those happen in one, it's beautiful and it's great, but it's sometimes difficult to make it happen all at once. I think what's maybe a little more common nowadays is we find subject to deals. Or you might find a seller who says, hey, I own this outright, or, I have enough cash that I could pay this off, and seller finance this direct, and you might be able to buy it those ways. I think it's really crucial to look at the acquisition side of it more than the disposition side or selling it. So figuring out how can you acquire it at terms that are going to work for you, and hopefully that with seller financing or subject to something that's going to make the cash flow numbers work. And then once you get into the deal, you can see, maybe there's an opportunity to rent this out. Maybe I've got enough margin I could turn around and list it on the MLS and actually make, a couple bucks. Or maybe I need to wrap it to an end buyer. I think a lot of people try to come in and swing for the fences, and they want to do all three of these at once. And, again, if it works, it works. But I've seen some deals where sellers, maybe paid too much for their house, or they have too much debt on it. They still want a couple bucks of equity, and then you're getting a property that you probably paid retail price for, and you're trying to sell it on a wrap mortgage, and it doesn't always work. A lot of times those wrap buyers, they might have the cash or the, means to go, get a deal, and, but they're going to want a discount on price. And so, if it all can pull together, it's great, but that one's probably a little bit more atypical for most, including myself.
Got it. I think you mentioned some really great aspects there where you don't want to force the different solutions upon like a deal. You really want to just listen first, be that problem solver, think of all the tools you have to help solve that problem, and then from there decide how to plug and play, whether it is doing a wrap mortgage as well, just sticking to seller finance depending on equity levels, or also bringing in subject to. How would someone who wanted to get started in the space, do they first look for deals, or do they first look for partnerships that can help them with, say, like financing a future deal?
My advice would really simply be, first and foremost, network. Build those relationships ahead of time. You don't necessarily need to look at finding your business partner for life, right out the gate, especially if you don't have any transactions under your belt. But I think it is very crucial to network so that when you do have a deal, you know who you can call. And so that's what I did. I networked ahead of time. I knew 2 or 3 people in the space, and I found the deal and called one of those individuals, and they were able to work through that with me. I think once you network, go out and try to find a deal. Maybe that's direct to seller. Maybe that's cold calling. Again, that's how I got started. I know that a lot of people do that. Maybe it's pay-per-click leads. Maybe it's social media. There's a really good quote that I like on marketing, particularly for real estate agents. It's that everything works and nothing doesn't. Basically meaning that you have to have consistency behind what you're doing. If you try to go and spend $500, for 2 months on, ads on Facebook, then the next week you're cold calling, and then you're doing, text blasting with launch control. It's like, you can be all over the board and spend, thousands or tens of thousands without really honing in on something. So I think it's important to build consistency, pick a lane and stay in it. And then again, try to look for deals and be creative, because seller financing subject to hybrid, they might work for certain situations, but you can't fit a square peg through a round hole. So you got to find a solution that works.
Awesome. You're speaking my language: consistency, tracking a bit before jumping to the next thing. I'm curious with like how you get inbound lead flow today, whether it's on your agent side or on your own like investment side. How do you like track to see what's working and what's not?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's something that I've been exploring really since the beginning of this year. I sort of revamped what I wanted to do coming into January this year, and it's been a little hit or miss for me. But I want to be consistent. I don't just want to try something for a couple months and move away. So I did about 12 months worth of Google pay-per-click leads, and I got a couple deals from that. One of my most recent deals, which was kind of a fun one, I bought a single wide trailer down in Newberry, South Carolina, about an hour south of where I am. Lady was in a desperate situation. She had the title to it, and she wanted to sell it, and she wanted to sell it for $1,000. That's what she wanted, so I paid her what she wanted. It's probably about what it's worth. It was in really, really rough condition, but I turned around and I sold that to an investor, somebody who was going to come in and actually fix and flip the trailer. And this was in a park. The park owner was very gracious and let us keep it there, while we were doing all this. But turned around and sold the trailer for about $8,000. And it's a nice little spread on that. But there's also more marketing costs that went into that, so it's not quite as profitable as it may seem. But still, it's a good little solid single for us. So I'm looking to do more of those, and I think my marketing channels are working to reflect that. So between myself and a virtual assistant, we're cold calling a good bit. And then I also do a lot of business with wholesalers. That's been one of my tried and true methods for buying deals the last 2-3 years. And so I'm still working with people who are, bringing deals, out of state, other places, because I'll buy all over the country if the numbers make sense.
Got it. So someone is a newbie and they want to learn more about creative finance, some of the things that you talk about. They're like, how do I get into hunter space? Well, how can they actually add value to you? What is your current buy box today that if someone sent you a deal, you'd be interested to look at it?
Yeah, fantastic question. I'm always looking to work with people who are finding deals. So if you have something that's a small apartment, I would say 2 to 15, maybe 20 units. I'm buying up in Ohio, pretty much anywhere except Cleveland. Please do not send me anything in Cleveland. But Dayton, Cincinnati, Columbus, Toledo, smaller towns I'll take a look at. I will also buy stuff locally in South Carolina. I'm based in Greenville here in the upstate. Again, agent locally as well. So I'm always looking for stuff here across the upstate and Columbia as well. I'll buy single family houses in Greenville and really across South Carolina. I will also buy a single family up in North Carolina, but I'm really looking for something that has seller financing. The seller's willing to keep their debt on subject to, or maybe there's a hybrid between. So you're utilizing both of those. So I'll look at single family all the way up to 20 units, anywhere North or South Carolina, and then small apartments up in Ohio.
I love it. You're like spread out regionally, but still very focused, which is excellent. So anyone who wants to get into hunter space and potentially partner on a deal, definitely take note of the last 2 minutes of what you mentioned. And curious, Hunter, since South Carolina has had such a boom over the last several years, like what are your thoughts on the market that, you've grew up in or been in college and also still existing in? Like, how have you seen it change over a period of time?
Yeah, I think for a lot of South Carolina, and I'm going to speak probably to Greenville, Charleston, and Myrtle Beach. I'm going to exclude Columbia because I honestly haven't looked at the numbers as much, so I don't want to speak incorrectly. But there's been such a influx of population since 2020. It's really caused a run up in value. And talking about Greenville specifically, I think Greenville's had almost too much of a run up in value. Not to say that it isn't justified, but I think it got a little ahead of its skis, so to speak. There were so many people moving here. People were obviously looking to buy anything and everything. And, very similar to other parts of the country where people were throwing 20, 30, 40 offers on one house, no appraisal, no contingencies, no inspection. It's like, it's a little, a little too much. But that being said, I think prices are going to stay flat, maybe decrease ever so slightly over the next 12, 18, 24 months. I think transactions are going to probably stay a little lower. They're down for the upstate as a whole, as well as for many other parts of the country. I'm feeling that with my own properties, my own listings, as well as seeing what a lot of other agents and sellers are talking about out there. So it's just going to be a tough market, but I think on the investor side, it does also present opportunities because we can come in and if somebody, for example, has a vacant house that they can't sell that's got a mortgage on it, they don't want to be landlords. Maybe there's an opportunity to buy it subject to. Maybe we can come in and solve a problem there. Doesn't always work, but it does create more opportunities and more conversations on the investment front. So that's something that I am excited about. I know there's a lot of other people here locally that I'm friends with. We're having conversations about putting in offers here and there. And I know there's a lot of people making those offers. I think long term, I very much have like a bullish mindset behind Greenville real estate as well as most real estate in the U.S. I think just seeing what the government did the last 4 years with the money supply and just sort of, I don't really want to say fiscally irresponsible, but it's really sort of borderline what they're doing with government aid. Even just looking at the damage with Hurricane Helene here in North and South Carolina, the amount of money that the government's sending through FEMA is minuscule compared to what they just sent over to Ukraine again. And so I'm not going to talk any more politics than that, but I think the spending in Congress is going to continue to create inflation. And it's hard for me to predict if that's going to be 2% or 10% year over year, but it's not going down. I guess I'll put it like that. So I want to get more on the asset ownership side. And so if I can find more properties, more assets to buy, in Greenville, across the upstate, across the country. I'm going to look for those, especially if I can find things really even that are like breaking even on cash flow. Like I'm closing on one next week that's basically breaking even in cash flow year one. But I know long term is going to have some great appreciation, and there's also opportunities to increase cash flow. So I'm definitely looking for deals out there.
Yeah, while you have your realtor hat on, just briefly, what conversations are you having with buyers and sellers?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more on the buyer side. Um, it, I wouldn't call it fear, but I would maybe call it some slight anxiety in the market. People don't know what the government's going to do interest rate wise. I mean, it's sort of already baked in that they're going to lower interest rates, but how much, and how does that affect the interest rates for mortgages? Buyers don't know. I think the election also plays into it. I mean, now granted, there are still transactions happening, but it's really not at the level that it was, 21 and 22. And I think a lot of agents got used to that. They got used to, putting something up on the market, getting 5 to 15, 20 offers and, getting highest and best for their client, selling it over listing price and getting a pat on the back and a good commission check. And nothing wrong with that. Agents are doing their job. They're helping their clients, but it's definitely a tighter market out there. And I think a lot of buyers are thinking, either A, I'm going to wait until after the election or the new year, or B, I'm going to hold and see, just what generally happens in the market. And if there's an opportunity, I'll buy it, but I don't want to force myself into something now. And on the opposite side of that coin, sellers, some of them are really wanting to hold true to pricing. They're saying, "Hey, I'm locked in at this basis or this property price, based on either what I bought it at or what my debt is at, and I don't want to sell it too far below that." And unfortunately, where sellers' pricing is and where the buyer demand is not aligned, and so we can't get a deal done. And so I'm seeing a lot of that. Obviously, trying to counsel and help my sellers as much as possible, and also help my buyers try to get the best deal for them too.
Excellent. Well, Hunter, you have so much knowledge being in the trenches as an agent, as an investor, actively pursuing deals. How can someone follow your journey to see what you'll be acquiring next?
Yeah, I appreciate that. If you want to connect with me, reach out to me on X. My handle is at the Hunter Gore. So happy to have a conversation on there. Honestly, I'm really bad about posting my own deals. I probably need to get better, and as well as deals for clients. But I am pretty active on Twitter, as much as I can be. So, or I say Twitter, it's X now, but yeah, connect with me on there and also on YouTube as well. Thank you both. Really appreciate you having me on, and great to talk about real estate.
Yeah, pleasure meeting you. Pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.